I've only ever told one person the full story, because every time I try, I hear myself. And I sound insane, like I'm describing something that doesn't fit in the world we live in. Not the world of reason, science, rules. It doesn't belong. And maybe that's why I'm telling it now. Here. Not to convince anyone, not to be believed, but because I need to let it go. To get it out. If you believe me, fine. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm not here to make anyone believe anything. I'm just here because I won't stay burdened with it anymore. This happened about 5 years ago. I was living in Seattle at the time, working as an IT security consultant for a decent-sized firm. I had just landed a fully remote position, which was a huge deal for me. Big salary bump, total flexibility, no more daily commutes in endless rain. But the thing I was most excited about was finally being able to move to be with Gina. Gina and I met in college. We dated for 6 years, long distance for 5 of them. She'd moved to a small city out on the East Coast after graduation, while I stayed in Seattle. Career stuff. She was chasing opportunities and I had my own path. We always said it was temporary, that one of us would move eventually. It just never happened. Every time we talked about it, it ended with, soon, maybe next year. So when this remote job came through, I thought, finally, I could live anywhere, and I already knew where I wanted to be. I called Gina that night, told her the news, expecting her to freak out. I thought she'd cry, scream, start planning immediately. Instead, she just said, "Oh, that's great." That should have been my first red flag. I was disappointed that she wasn't more excited, but I ignored it. I notified my office I was moving, broke my lease, sold my furniture, and what I didn't need went into long-term storage. I packed my car and drove cross-country with this dumb grin on my face. The entire way there, I kept thinking, we finally did it. 2 weeks after I arrived, she sat me down in the living room of her apartment, my bags still half unpacked in the corner, and told me she'd met someone else and that she felt we had grown apart over the years. She went on to conclude that it was over between us. Just like that. No emotion. No tears. Just done. She even said, "You can stay here till you find another place if you want." I didn't answer. I walked into the room, threw my clothes into my suitcase, grabbed my work bag, my laptop and charger, and left. I was barely down the street when I finally allowed myself to feel that emotional, crushing blow. I pulled around the corner and just let it out for a good couple of minutes. Then I pulled myself back together. I put the car back into drive and pulled off. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove. It was winter. Cold but clear. It was a mild winter by East Coast standards. I remember the road being slick with salt, the bare trees clawing at the sky. I didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't think. I just kept driving up the coast. Eventually, I had to pull over for gas. I was starving, exhausted. My eyes burned. I checked the time, just past midnight. I needed somewhere to stay, but I couldn't stomach a hotel. I don't know why. I just didn't want to be in some beige corporate box with thin walls and vending machines humming down the hall. So I opened the Airbnb app. Most of the good places were booked or expensive. But then I saw one. A bungalow. Right on the coast. The photos looked amazing. Weathered wood exterior, big windows facing the water, a porch with wicker chairs, even a little fireplace. It looked warm, peaceful. The price was weirdly low, available immediately. No minimum stay. I figured it was too good to be true, but I was too tired to care. I booked it. It was another 3-hour drive, which felt like nothing compared to the 30 I'd just done 2 weeks before. I grabbed something to eat from a fast food drive-thru and hit the road again. I don't remember the name of the town. I know that's the part no one ever believes, but it's true. I read it when I booked. I entered it in my GPS. I even said it out loud at one point while driving. And now, it's just gone. Like a file that's been deleted and overwritten 100 times. But I remember how it looked when I got there. Even in the dark, it was beautiful. The kind of place you'd see on the front of a travel brochure. Quaint, clean, too perfect to be real. The streets were narrow and old but well kept. Storefronts with little hanging signs, wooden benches on every corner, trees wrapped in string lights that weren't turned on. It was quiet. And even though I couldn't see much, just what my headlights caught as I drove through, it still made an impression. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. The kind that feels intentional. Like the whole town had gone still just before I arrived. Like it was holding its breath. The bungalow was tucked away at the far end of a narrow dead-end street that sloped toward the water. It sat right on the edge of the coast, backed up to a patch of rocks and seagrass that rolled down to the shoreline. There wasn't another house within shouting distance, just the sea behind it, and silence in every other direction. When I opened the door, I didn't feel fear. Not yet. It felt peaceful, cozy even. The lights were already on. A soft lamp lit the living room in warm gold. The floorboards creaked in a comfortable way. The heat was on. The throw blankets were folded perfectly over the arm of the couch. It felt like a place meant for someone like me. Someone tired. Someone emotionally wrecked. Someone who just needed to rest. The weirdest part? The note. A bottle of wine and 2 glasses sat on the coffee table, next to a folded card with my name on it. "Welcome, Cory. Let us know if you need anything." That's what it said. It was handwritten. Which didn't make sense because this had been a last-minute booking, like hours ago, and no one had contacted me directly. Not a call, not a text. The message had just been an automated confirmation. So how did they know my name? How was there a note? I remember holding the card and looking around like someone might be hiding behind a curtain, watching to see if I smiled at the gesture. I didn't smile, but I stayed. I dropped my bag and went to bed, still in my clothes. The sound of the waves outside pulled me under like a drug. I woke up around 2 p.m. the next day. I had nearly 10 missed calls from Gina. No voicemails, just calls, followed by a text. I shouldn't have said what I did. Please just call me. I ignored it, set my phone to silent and turned it face down on the nightstand. More missed calls would come in throughout the day. But I was already past the point of caring. After showering, I got dressed and went for a drive. My stomach was growling, but I didn't mind. I wanted to see the town in daylight. And that's when I noticed it. This place, whatever it was, looked like it had been ripped from a postcard. Quaint, clean, beautiful, little white fences. Cobblestone sidewalks. Colonial-style storefronts with pastel shutters and gold leaf signage. A red brick town hall with a bell tower. A corner bookstore with an outdoor display of hardcovers sealed under glass. The sun was out, and the town looked like it was posing for a calendar cover. It reminded me of all those New England coastal towns, places like Bar Harbor or Kennebunkport, except somehow too perfect, not a hair out of place. And yet, it was completely empty. Not one car driving past, not one person on the sidewalk. Stores were closed, shades drawn, lights off. And it wasn't just a couple of places. Every single business was shut tight. It was the middle of the week. No signs on the doors, no hours posted, no be back soon notes. It didn't make sense. I spent 30 minutes driving loops through the town, trying to find anything open. Eventually, I gave up and searched for nearby restaurants. The closest open spot was 40 minutes away, in the next town over. So I drove, and the whole way I kept thinking, where did everyone go? Dinner felt like stepping back into the real world. The place I found was this cozy little diner tucked off the main road. Bright neon signs, the smell of burgers and coffee hitting me the second I walked in. Warm, lively. I slid into a booth and ordered something big and greasy without thinking. Just the first thing that sounded like comfort. When the waitress came back, she smiled and said, I looked like I hadn't eaten in days. She wasn't wrong. I devoured the whole plate without even tasting most of it. Just grateful to be somewhere that smelled like food and sounded like people. I stayed there longer than I needed to. Not for the food, but for the noise. The normalcy. I watched people stroll past the big windows. Kids laughing on the sidewalk. A truck rolled by blasting music out of an open window. Someone was arguing playfully on speakerphone in the parking lot. Life. It made me realize how suffocating the silence had been back where I was staying. That town didn't just feel quiet, it felt emptied. I got back in my car around 8 p.m. and made the drive back. It was full dark when I reached the edge of the town again. As I crossed back into the town limits, something had changed. There were people now. A few here and there walking along the sidewalks. Alone. Quiet. Not talking. Not laughing. They didn't look strange at first. Just bundled in coats, heads down. Normal enough. But there was something off. None of them seemed to be going anywhere. Just moving for the sake of movement. And as I passed each one, I couldn't shake the feeling that their heads turned, just slightly, to watch me go by. Not in a neighborly way, in a way that felt aware. I told myself I was imagining it, but the silence between the figures, the gaps in the darkness, felt heavier than they should have. Back at the bungalow, I was trying to unwind, watching reruns, sipping from the wine I told myself I wasn't going to open. But my chest felt tight, my body jittery. I couldn't sit still. The drive, the silence, Gina's messages piling up in my phone, the way the town felt. I needed to move, to sweat, to get out of my head. Running had always done that for me. No matter where I was, no matter what was going on, if I could run, I could think straight again. So I laced up, threw on my hoodie, and grabbed my keys. The boardwalk was only about 7 minutes from the bungalow. I remembered seeing it earlier that day, stretching out along the shore like the backbone of the town. It was almost 3 miles end to end. Now at night it looked like something from a photo someone took decades ago. Worn down, weathered, dimly lit. I parked near the north end. No other cars. Just mine and the sound of the ocean pushing against the rocks in the distance. The air was freezing. Wind off the water, thick with salt and cold. I got out, stretched briefly, popped in one earbud and started jogging. At first it felt good. The old wood planks thudded beneath my sneakers in a rhythm I'd memorized from years of running. My breath came quick and clean. The cold stung, but it helped. The boardwalk was lined with shuttered shops on both sides. Souvenir stores, fudge stands, arcades, ice cream windows, all locked up tight for the winter. Metal grates pulled down, posters flapping in the wind. Every 100 feet or so, a lamppost cast a cone of yellow light. The rest of the boardwalk lay in dim twilight. There were no people, no cars, no noise except the waves and my own footfalls. I had maybe a mile behind me when it happened. That sensation. You know it when it hits. The electric buzz at the base of your neck. That someone's behind you feeling. I turned my head slightly and froze mid-step. There was a man standing on the boardwalk, far behind me, maybe 100 feet. He wasn't walking. Wasn't stretching or moving or even pretending to look at his phone. He was just standing there, hood up, hands by his sides, facing me. I turned back around, told myself it was nothing, a local, someone else taking a walk. But something about him felt unsettling. I picked up my pace, focused on my breathing, tried to lose myself in the run. But the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it got worse. I turned again. He was closer now. Maybe 60 feet back. Still not moving, still facing me. I stopped completely this time. Turned fully. He didn't react, didn't shift, didn't move his arms or adjust his stance. Just stood there like someone had placed him there. I backed away a few steps. He stayed rooted. My heart was starting to race, not from the run, from something else. I turned again and started jogging, a little faster this time. No music now. I'd ripped the earbud out without realizing it. Now it was just my feet, my breath, and the creaking planks under me. And behind that, another set of footsteps. Faint, not quite matching mine. Offbeat, hesitant. I turned again. He was even closer, and this time, I saw it. Just for a second, his face caught a flicker of light from a lamppost overhead, and I saw eye shine. Not glowing like in horror movies, just this subtle glint, like animal eyes at night. Reflective, wrong. Human eyes don't do that. Not unless there's something else behind them. I didn't wait. I took off, flat out sprinting now. The boardwalk groaned under my weight as I pushed harder than I had in years. My breath came in hard, fast bursts. My knees ached. The salt air burned my throat. I wasn't running for peace anymore. I was running to get the hell away. I turned my head again. He was still behind me, still not moving, still gaining. It made no sense. I didn't see him walk. I didn't hear him run. But somehow, he was closer every time I looked, as if space itself cheated to get him to me, like reality was helping him catch me. I passed an old seafood shack and nearly fell when the board beneath me buckled. Caught myself, kept going. My car was still far off, dimly visible under a sputtering street lamp. I had tunnel vision now. I could feel him behind me, not hear him. And that was somehow worse. The silence had weight now, as if he didn't make sound because he wasn't part of this world. I reached the parking lot in a panic, fumbling with my keys. Hit the unlock button. Lights blinked. I threw myself toward the door and slammed it shut behind me. Locked it, hand shaking. Then I looked up. He was standing at the edge of the lot, right where I'd just been. No sound, no running, just there. Hood still up, face in shadow, except for the faintest catch of light in those eyes. That same animal gleam, soft, cold, and impossibly wrong. I didn't look again. I cranked the wheel, threw the car into drive, and peeled away from the boardwalk like I was escaping a crime scene. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away from him. I didn't stop driving until I was out of sight of the boardwalk. Even then, I could still feel him behind me. That figure, still watching, yet somehow always closer. My hands were tight around the wheel, jaw clenched. The car's engine hummed too loud in the silence. I started turning down side streets at random, trying to circle back toward the bungalow. My GPS was useless now. I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted to get back to the house. That's when I saw the first one. A man standing on the corner just under a street lamp. Still, facing the road. As I passed, I noticed he didn't glance at me. He was already looking, directly at me. Not in surprise, not in curiosity. In focus, like he'd been waiting. Then another, further down the street. A woman in a coat, hood up, just standing on her lawn. Still, watching. No movement. No phone. no expression. I thought, maybe it's how I'm driving. Maybe I'm speeding or swerving. So I eased off the gas, took the next corner more gently, smoothed it out. But that's when I realized something far worse. They were still watching. I turned my head and saw one of them, an old man maybe, in a front yard. His face barely visible under his hood. He didn't glance at the car. He was already locked on me. His head followed as I passed. So did the next one, and the next. It wasn't the way I was driving. It was me they were focused on. The streets began to feel tighter, houses closer, the lights dimmer. Then I saw him, the tall one, standing beneath a tree near the sidewalk, hoodie up, hands in his pockets. I couldn't see his face at first. Then, as I passed, our eyes met, and I saw it. That same slight glow, not like headlights, not like reflection, like something was burning low behind his eyes, something malevolent. I looked forward just in time to slam the brakes. A group of people stood in the middle of the road. 6, 7, I couldn't tell. All with hoods pulled up, faces hidden in shadow. They weren't crossing the street, they weren't walking, just standing, blocking the road. I didn't honk, didn't roll down my window. I hit reverse, hard. The tires squealed. I whipped the wheel and gunned it backward, then shot down the nearest side street. But it didn't matter. They were everywhere. On sidewalks, in driveways, just standing. Still, staring. All of them turned toward me as I passed. By the time I reached the street where the bungalow sat, I felt like the last person left in the world who didn't understand the rules. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Everything was quiet. No footsteps, no voices. Just them, turning, watching, following me with their eyes. I ran to the front door, key already in hand, got it in, turned the lock, shoved the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I locked it. Deadbolt, chain, every latch. Then I stood there, catching my breath, trying to listen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I moved to the window, lifted the curtain a half inch and peeked out. They were gathering now. 3 on the sidewalk, one by the porch, another by the hedges. Then more. In the front yard, the side yard, even the backyard, filling in the space, just standing, just watching. I backed away from the window and checked every door, every window, locked, latched, curtains drawn tight. I turned off the lights, sat in the dark, listening, waiting. Then I saw him, through the slats in the blinds, the man from the boardwalk, standing in the middle of the front yard, still, centered, like the others had made room for him. My knees buckled and I had to hold onto the wall. I didn't go to the bedroom. I didn't turn on a single light. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the biggest knife I could find. Then I sat on the couch, in the dark, blade in hand, eyes on the door, and I waited. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up on the couch just after sunrise. My back ached. My hand was still wrapped around the kitchen knife. My jaw was sore from how tightly I must have been clenching it in my sleep. For a few seconds, I didn't move. The house was still. Quiet. Too quiet. I sat up slowly, heart already pounding, and peeked between the curtains. And that's when I realized they were gone. No one in the yard. No one by the windows. No one standing in the street like statues. Just that strange, quiet town. Clean. Still. And now drenched in a cold, gray morning rain. The sky was low and dark, a thunderstorm rumbling in the distance, echoing faintly off the water. There was something heavier about the air. Not just the pressure of the storm, but the sense that the thing that had filled this town during the night had simply slipped away, but was lurking just underneath the surface. I didn't shower, didn't eat. I packed everything in less than 10 minutes, threw my bag into the back seat, and backed out of the driveway without looking at the house again. I didn't breathe easy until the ocean was behind me, and the last street sign was swallowed by the fog. I drove for hours, inland, away from the coast, away from the storm, away from anything that smelled like salt or silence. At some point, early afternoon, I pulled into a mid-sized city. Modern buildings, traffic lights, pedestrians with umbrellas. Life. I found a tall downtown hotel, sleek, glassy, full of people. Real people. Talking, moving, checking in and out. A lobby full of light, TVs playing the news, a restaurant buzzing with conversation. Normal. I stood in line, gave my name, and when the front desk clerk handed me a key card, I almost broke down, because it meant I was somewhere real again. Later, in my room, I opened the Airbnb app to cancel the rest of the stay. But the listing? Gone. Not canceled. Erased. No trace. I searched my inbox for the confirmation email. Nothing. Checked my receipts, my payment history, my credit card transaction history. Gone. It was like I'd never booked anything. Like I'd never been there. That's when I knew. I wasn't supposed to get out. Whatever that place was, it had picked me. The bungalow waiting with the note, the closed shops, the people watching, the thing on the boardwalk. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a trap, like an anglerfish, luring you in with the illusion of safety. And if I hadn't sensed it, that feeling in my gut when I saw the man on the boardwalk, if I'd ignored that, if I hadn't turned back when I did, if I hadn't run, if I'd waited too long or failed to make it back to my car in time, if I'd gotten stopped by those things, those people who weren't people, standing in the street, watching me like they'd already decided I was theirs, if I'd hesitated on the porch, if I hadn't made it inside and locked the door, if I hadn't had the sense to leave the next morning while I still had the chance, I don't think I'd be here right now. That town was hunting me, and I was supposed to be caught. But somehow, I got out. Barely. Eventually, I left the hotel after a couple of weeks of figuring out my next move. I didn't go back to the coast. I didn't go back to Seattle. I wanted as much space between me and that town as I could possibly get. So I started over again, fresh. Took advantage of my remote job, packed what little I had left, and relocated to a big city in Texas. Someplace warm, loud, crowded, ordinary. No fog, no boardwalks, no dead-end streets. Just normal life. The kind of life you don't realize is a blessing until you've seen what's waiting just outside it. I built something new, something clean. Then I met Kara, a true Texas girl, part country, part city. Warm, outgoing, honest in a way that could disarm you without trying. She listened like she actually wanted to understand. And she did. We fell in love, got married. And for a long time, I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone. Because how do you explain something like that? That you stayed somewhere the internet says never existed. That a town disappeared from your memory. That you weren't supposed to survive. But one night I told her. And Kara, God bless her, didn't flinch. She opened her laptop and started showing me things. Reddit threads, YouTube videos, obscure message boards, people describing places that didn't make sense. Gas stations they stopped at during a road trip, only to find them abandoned days later. or completely gone when they tried to go back. Bars where they'd had a drink, talked to a bartender, heard music playing, then later couldn't find a single trace the place ever existed. Small towns they passed through that felt just slightly off, too quiet, too staged. And when they searched for them again, maps, GPS, even physically retracing their steps, they were gone. No records, no signs, like they'd slipped between cracks in the world, like a trip to the Twilight Zone. Over and over, the same descriptions came up: wrong, creepy, unsettling, bizarre, and always vanishing. It was haunting. It was chilling. And it made me feel better than anything ever had. Because I knew I wasn't alone. I don't know where that town was. I don't know if it still exists. I don't know if it's moving. But I know this: it was alive. Not just those things masquerading as people, the place itself, a living, breathing thing. Predatory, symbiotic, built to lure people like me in, to feed. I was lucky. I left, but I wasn't meant to. And sometimes when things get quiet, when the wind shifts just right, or I see a hoodie standing too still on a sidewalk, I think about that place, and I wonder who else found it, and who never got out.